I doing?
Can't hear a word to say. Can it be louder? Can't hear a word to say, honey.
Okay, is that better? Is that better? A little?
Yeah, that's all you got.
Can we move it up a little?
No, that's all you got.
That's all I got? All right, is that better? Yeah, I can hear it. Yeah.
It's all about holding the mic close. That's what it's going to be.
Okay.
Oh, no, not the echo.
I was reverb there.
Unless you take it back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ready to go?
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming today. I think this is our 7th Poetry Fest in Long Branch, and it's good to see you, all friends. I want to thank Mayor Pallone for letting us do this stuff here, and here he is, John. Yeah, come up, John. And I'm very happy, as always, to see Congressman Pallone here, who will talk to us in a little while.
Thank you, Manuel. And good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. Of course, I want to thank Emmanuel. This is what, the 5th? Sixth Poetry Festival here in Long Branch. I'm sorry we didn't have it last year, but I'm glad you're here today. I'm going to read a very short poem. And it's called Loving with Sinatra. And it's about a grieving widow who found solace from the death of her husband in Sinatra songs. And I wrote it, I'm reading it because I'm a fan of Sinatra, as I'm sure many of you are, but also Frank Sinatra, as many of you probably know, or at least I saw the Netflix documentary, Sinatra, that he met his first wife on the boardwalk here in Long Branch. So let me just read that real quick. And of course, this is from the widow's point of view. Can you hear me okay? Vanity driven, I hadn't shed a tear for more than 25 years. My eyes would become too puffy. But when Russ, my husband of 39 years, died, at my pastor's urging, I began to cry what seemingly became rivers, lakes, and oceans. Realizing I need to contain the torrent, I began to gorge myself with tunes by Frank Sinatra. I'd play them all over the house and in the car, and sometimes they'd even put me to sleep. And it worked. I began to write about our life related to the Sinatra songs Russ and I loved. Early on in our courtship, we'd hear, "Come fly with me," and so we did, to the far reaches of the earth. Then in the end, at the crowded ICU unit of the hospital, Russ and I danced up to heaven as I bade him farewell. Approaching the pearly gates, I said, "Okay, St. Peter, hit it. New York, New York." And we twirled to that song with our usual abandon. Only this time, he went on through the gates while I remained behind. Thank you.
I wish I had that gorgeous voice. Congressman Pallone, do us the honor to talk to us. Read a poem. Great congressman. Great man.
Thank you. I don't know, I listened to my brother and I said, I hope you don't think that the only thing that we read are like, sad poems, because mine are sad. Well, they're not sad, but they're thought-provoking, maybe is a better word. I wanted to, I actually wrote down, because I wanted to think today about why I was using these poems. When I do this for the last few years, I always like to either read Emmanuel's poems or Robert Pinsky's poems or poems that relate to Long Branch. And so I thought, and today I'm reading Two by Pinsky. And so I wanted you to understand why I read why I'm reading these poems today. And just briefly, the reason that I love Robert Pinsky's poems is because they relate so much to my own experience in Long Branch. Now, I think most of you know who he is, right? He was the poet, well, he's still alive. He was the poet laureate for 2 years of the nation. His whole childhood was on Broadway. In other words, he was born here, he was raised here, but his world as a child was the Broadway corridor, right? And you know, like the streets and the ocean and the beach that radiated from Broadway, particularly downtown. And at the time, and when John and I grew up, downtown was, I would say it was predominantly Jewish and African American, right? Particularly the stores and the restaurants. It was almost like you were in, you know, like a Jewish quarter, if you will. And the synagogues were down there as well. But there was always an Italian presence too, because you know there always were a significant number of Italian Americans. And I don't like the ethnic experience is important in his poems. That's why I'm mentioning it. But a lot of Pinsky's poems are about loss, and that's why I say depressing, right? They're about the loss of his childhood, his father, who I knew. I actually knew his father more so than I know him. He was an optician, and the fact of the matter is that the Long Branch doesn't exist anymore for the most part. Okay, so some of the poems make direct reference to Long Branch, including the one I'm going to read that's called "The Destruction of Long Branch." Okay, but others are not as direct. But you can tell because he talks about the sand, the beach, the ocean, and that would be the other one that I read. But what I wanted to say, going back to what I said at the beginning, is you could think that Robert's poetry is very dark and that his memories of his hometown are negative. But I want everybody to understand that that's not true, right? Because just because we lament the loss of our past doesn't mean that the memories have a bad impact on our lives. And I think that for Robert and for me, those memories can often lead to positive and even significant action to improve things here in Long Branch or elsewhere in the country or the world. And so when I do things in Washington, I always think of Long Branch, my childhood, my parents, but the memories have a very positive influence on what I try to accomplish in a very practical way. So I know I'm giving you a lot of background, but I just want you to understand why Robert Pinsky is so important to me, and I believe important to our city too. If you go to where South and North Broadway meet before you go to the ocean, where Broadway separates into North and South, there's a park there near the CBS that's named in his honor, and it's not far from this area where he grew up and what he talks about. So anyway, sorry if I kept you too long, but I just wanted to give you. So the first poem is called "The Destruction of Long Branch." Okay. When they came out with artificial turf, I went back home with 1,000 miles. I dug a trench by moonlight from the ocean and let it wash in quietly and make a brackish quicksand which the tide sluiced upward from the streets and ditches. The downtown that the shopping centers killed, the garden apartments, the garages, the station, the little Africa on So Help Me Liberty Street, the nicer sections, all settled gently in a drench of sand and sunk with a minimum of noise. The hollow of the shut-down movie house made bubbles, wooden porches crumbled, but ranch homes in the new developments tilting a little slipped in whole. I pushed back pieces that floated up, one gash of neon, the martini glass that winked outside a mafia hotel, a gas pump, a bouquet of socks. From Woolie's window, I even kept a few that pinroll from my grandpa's bar. I laid out hills and ridges, and with a brush, I creosoted lumps of sewage. When the school had shat its plumbing as it went, I fitted my carpet on the crust. That made-in-Japan grass went on like magic with a neat margin at the beach, and I still had half the night. How great, I said. Then, since forgiving had been fun, I thought I'd leave a monument or two cautiously elegiac I dug. Some scenes back up to compose my parkland vistas, benches and gloomy vegetation, some things already dead, an abandoned boardwalk, some weather, an unfilled foundation, with a brush of huckleberry or a ragged fern, cabbage growth along a curb, thin flags of sumac from a vacant lot, avid in a tearing rain. So that's the destruction of Long Bridge. Now this is the one that doesn't mention Long Bridge, but you know he's talking about it to some extent, and it's called The Want Bone, and it's one of my favorites. It's short. The tongue of the waves tolled in the earth's bell, blue rippled and soaked in the fire of blue. The dried mouth bones of a shark in the hot swale gaped on nothing but sand on either side. The bone tasted of nothing and smelled of nothing, a scalded, toothless harp, uncrushed, unstrung. The joined arcs made the shape of birth and craving, and the welded open shape kept mouthing, oh. Ossified cords held the corners together, in groin spirals pleated like a summer dress. But where was the limber grin, the gash of pleasure? Infinitesimal mouse bore it away. The beach scrubbed and etched and pickled it clean. But oh, I love you, it sings, my little country, my food, my parent, my child. I want you my own, my flower, my fin, my life, my lightness, my oh. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Another man with a gorgeous voice. John Thomas Malone. Yay. Hey JT, how you doing?
Good morning. July 4th is about liberty, freedom, and justice. So I wanted to write a poem about someone who represented what this holiday was all about. I chose Sojourner Truth, since she was an abolitionist who fought for women's rights. I also chose to write an acrostic poem with the word determination. D. Demonstrating against inequity, she fights for E, equality, with persistence, determination, and a thought-out speech. As a true supporter of E, egalitarianism, she fights for women's R, rights. Her words are poignant, descriptive, and M, motivational. She discusses the discriminatory I inconsistencies that we face in society. Why do we have to live in an N, nation divided? Sojourner Truth should be remembered as an A, accomplished advocate of civil rights who T, taught us that we can stand up for what we believe, I, in, that we can have injustice and equal opportunities. O, on this day in 1851, a moving speech will affect the world. N, nonetheless, we must keep fighting against injustice.
Thank you, JT. Beautiful. The Malone dynasty. Yeah, you guys are bright and gorgeous. Great voices. Jennifer Stoll Brown. Yeah. The lady with the hazel eyes.
Good morning. My name is Jennifer Stahl Brown. I'm going to share a few ideas, mostly about, from what I could tell in my little theme here, animals and or food. So here we go. The first poem is called Jealousy. When I see bees, I want to rove through the clover with them, get dusty with pollen, put my face, my antenna, my compound eye in the white flower punch bowl, carry the pollen back to the hive on my hairy legs, and gossip with the other workers while we stuff pollen into waiting cells. The cat in the other room is dying. He's lying in a sunny spot on the carpet. His tail is still. Death is coming for him. I can hear the rattle, a distant mew asking if he's ready. He's barely moving, but I know he's dreaming. The funny way cats dream, making little squeaks as they stretch, and sighing heavily if you disturb them with a scratch behind the ears. I imagine he's dreaming of Ephrathah and chasing fat rabbits over green and yellow hills, a Don Quixote of sorts. He licks his lips in his sleep. He's thirsty, but won't take a drink. I'll miss the way he looks at me, as if always asking, "What do you need from me?" Perhaps I've loved him too fiercely. Thank you. This is called Before Surgery. The hospital bed is soft, more soft than I thought it would be. I imagined more vinyl, more antiseptic, easy to clean and wipe away traces of pain. Do beds remember? I think they do. I close my eyes as the nurse asks questions. What medications do you take? I printed a list. Are you wearing any jewelry? No. Do you have a ride home? Yes. Have you eaten today? No. Yes. I forgot. I had 2 strawberries for breakfast. Another nurse comes in and lays a warm blanket on me. Warm like she pulled it from a giant toaster. So warm it fogs up my glasses. So warm I'm uncomfortable. And then I'm not. I am a baby bird. Another nurse comes in and adjusts my IV. Tammy, Annie, or maybe it's Jamie, I don't ask. My doctor comes to my bedside, takes my hand. I will take care of you, he says. I close my eyes again. Before I can protest, there's a click of wheels letting go. The bed is rolling, flying, floating past nurses discussing who's working the holiday. I did not know I'd enjoy this part. I want to be wheeled everywhere now. So I eat strawberries every morning for breakfast, and this is what this is based on. It's called First Strawberry. Before hunter-gatherers, before tools and walking on 2 legs, when we were truly animals, scraping the ground with our hairy knuckles, eating bugs, more ape than man, what was it like when we first tasted strawberries? We watched as wild rabbits devoured the berries, the stems, the leaves. We decided we would try, our interest piqued by wild rabbits with reddened mouths, strawberry juice staining the fur there. When we tasted strawberries for ourselves, we closed our eyes, stopped gobbling with both hands for just a moment to glory in what we had sitting on our tongues. We readied ourselves to fight sweet-toothed mammals for the queen of berries, for perfumed flesh. Let the wild rabbits eat the blueberries we trample and leave behind. So the last poem I'm going to share is based on a conversation I had with a fellow poet, Frank Valentino over there, same day, about 2 years ago, and we were just chatting, and Frank told me that he's a butcher and he's also a vegetarian. And I could not get this idea out of my head, that duality there that just makes no sense. And this is what came out of it. So this is about a vegan butcher. He is covered in blood where the apron does not cover. The sink is full of tongues, frozen beef tongues, each as big as a man's shoe. The guys in the back are breaking cows, sawing hindquarters, cutting hip bones, then shanks. When he blows his nose, he can smell the deaths. The conversation gets raw as flesh is dressed, and the owner's daughter calls out an order to St. Francis for locally sourced steaks and chicken. Sometimes he cries as he hands over ribeyes, wrapped in butcher paper, the best way to preserve flavor, he always says. He reminds himself for that as long as we've been human, we've killed. On the feast of St. Francis, he lights oil lamps on his stoop and gets his pets blessed, eats honey almond cake. He has this dream where he calms the animals before slaughter, runs his hands over heads and necks in a gesture meant to soothe, or else the meat will taste of adrenaline. But none of the animals go quietly. They know death when they're near it. He hears the cows crying in his sleep, sees the panic of the last live pig in the pen. Thank you. All right, Frank, you are next. Frank Valentino.
What's your revenge for?
Oh.
Yeah, I actually was a butcher for a long time. As the Palones know, my family had butcher shops in Long Branch here for years. And I haven't eaten meat in a very long time. So up there, they're looking down, either laughing or crying. Again, I'm going to read some poems about the Long Branch that I grew up in, that I knew, that doesn't exist anymore. It's called West End Ride. Free ride roamers hitched rides with stick shift heroes and down street ramblers, knowing that halfway there is better than no way there. Music played from lights of dial on radio that cut the silence of strangers riding together to the next stop road of hitchhikers. Dutch coffee at Inkwell in West End, where girls in black turtlenecks broke hearts before they placed hot cups on small round wooden tables with a smile. The sound of a dime dropping into phone on wall, and silent words drifted towards the blue smoke of candle flame as she hung up and walked across the room. 2 miles or 2 steps, all the same, in dense fog down by the beach where you can't see down Brighton Avenue. And there wasn't a car in sight to hitch ride to Asbury. The creaky sign swung in wind above Reed's bicycle shop, where the 2 old brothers quietly worked turning wrenches and pumping oil from dented 3M cans onto chains of colorful bicycles. That's about Brighton Avenue when I was a kid. Thank you. The second one is called North End Long Branch, where the USO Beach. Any locals remember the surfing that was down there? Time and place drifted upon a wave at beach where towels threw colors on sand while we all waited for the next set. Kids from Newport Beach came east carrying Dewey Weber boards on top of VW bus. Locals leaned against the wall at USO Beach, watching and waiting for waves. The Woody wagon with Florida plates parked in driveway on Atlantic Avenue, and Walter's old Ford pickup parked at Kiernan Beach, and Jimmy Mont hitched a ride to White Sands Beach Club. She was standing in back of surf shop as board foam fell like long snowflakes while Vince shaped new designs, and the smell of fiberglass resin in the air, and that slap of the old screen door that rattled the glass window, shaking the new boards on the racks. 65 Chevy Nova, dropping off little sister and brother at beach. And don't tell mom and dad about me speeding on Ocean Avenue, she said. Sitting on driftwood, waiting for low tide waves, listening to transistor radio on WABC and WNBC, Cousin Brucey.
He's our local Walt Whitman, ain't he? Yeah. Miss Gwendolyn Dixon. We ran into each other on the boardwalk, and she said, "I'm a poet, can I read?" And there she is.
Good morning. My name is Gwendolyn Dixon, and my first opportunity to read here. And my first poem is called Enduring Friendship. It tells the tales of people who've known each other maybe from grade school on up until they're retired. How do you sum up decades of friendship? Do you simply say, we knew each other along the way? When we met, we were young. Now our babies are all grown and have children of their own. Prayerfully, their village will contain a friendship like ours to maintain. We've had much to do with each other, never a bother. We didn't fuss, we didn't fight. We loved each other with all our might. Now my friend has left this earthly presence, a loss so dear, if not for the premise, one day when the Lord has called me home, that bond we had will continue on. Besides God and family, we have our friends, and enduring friendships past this earthly end. Not birthed by our mothers, nor sired by our fathers, yet related just the same. Take your rest, you have earned. Our kinship continues, we have learned. And since other people are sneaking in other poems, I'll sneak in another one too. This one is titled Women with Wings. As you travel life's highway, what is your reflection? Are your wings a patchwork collection? Do women have heavenly wings? Are they torn, tattered, missing a section? Did they get soiled along the way? How did we make it to this day? Did the tailor have to make an emergency repair while we prayed for redemption? We're not angels, that's for sure, or we would not be on this shore. Our wings are battered, scarred, and all sorts of things to remind us of our imperfection and to give our life a new direction. With God's guidance, we will soar. Thank you.
We actually met at the opening of the Art Center. It was a great event, John. The Art Center opening. Mr. Mayor, the Art Center opening was a great event. That's where we met. I got it confused with the boards. My favorite poet and favorite reader, Greg Brown.
Looking around.
He knew I'd call him.
I got hard copies of poems my lovely wife will be handing out. I always like to read along in the hymnal. My themes of poetry are two-legged animals and the things they devour. This poem is about FDR and his fireside chats. This chat, which the poem references, took place in 1940, before we entered the war, and he makes some remarks about European activities, but it's really about the experience of listening to the conversation from the White House at that time, and being sort of drawn into the national story one at a time. As we all are, we find ourselves drawn to be a community in some way. It's a very unexpected experience for the individualist amongst us. A fireside chat. In the White House, the instrument, a broadcast mic, sits like a trophy, banded above with a label of commercial ownership, CBS, NBC, and perched at an angle on a solid brass stand heavy enough to break a toe. The dingus itself is unimpressive, an improbable hockey puck with a lion's tail trailing to the floor. But this is the miracle device, the microphone that will send one voice to 20 million ears and more. Radio gathered us together back then, brought us within the circle of invisible voices heralding prayer or pastime. We move an empty chair over by the fire, and a friend sits in it, ready for his little visit. He tells us his concerns and plans, and we listen as if they were our own concerns and plans. His voice carries us into matters we had thought extraneous to us, but which, as we listen, as we curl into the story, slowly become our own. It is your problem, no less than it is mine. Together, we cannot fail. He admits a jokey moral, a slightly acerbic point, and we decide to take it the right way, as it was meant. His voice is so silken solemn and relaxed. The man who strikes first admits that his own ideas have run out. Eventually, he gets around to history, to the endless perspective of time, and where we might stand in such a landscape. And from where we sit, listening, we seem to be a part of his vista. The way of thought of a nation whose origins go back to Jamestown and Plymouth Rock. At some point, his storytelling transforms into a passionate plea. he may need our help. And we listen with a new cautiousness and with renewed concern to his advocating and insisting voice as he eventually gets to the evil incident that's really bugging him. On this 10th day of June, 1940, the hand that held the dagger has struck it into the back of his neighbor. We'll have to stand with him or abandon our friendship. There's no middle ground this time, however endless and friendly he seemed at our first invitation, when the chair was cold and we let his voice begin without expectation. I call for effort, courage, sacrifice, devotion, granting a love of freedom. All of these are possible. A quiet manifests in the room after he finishes, and we rise from our seats, glancing around uncertainly. We look outside where the variable firelight bleeds through a tall window. There's a wing of wind going by, disturbing our home, and we notice our own figures stretching before us, the silent fire at our backs. Our bodies are wavering on the ground in inconstant light, and they remind us of the strange shapes a flag makes when shadowed on the lawn.
Daniel Weeks, and then you'll introduce Estelle Bajou. Right?
Thanks for coming out, everybody. Happy 4th of July. Thanks, Emmanuel, for putting this together and for the city footing the bill, I guess. The pandemic, I guess, got everyone to think about mortality a little more than they would otherwise, right? Poets think about it anyway, but in this case it became a little sharper. And it occurred to me in March, like, wow, if I catch this, I could be dead in 2 weeks. And I had been working on a long poem since 1996, and I figured, I better finish this thing up, you know? So one thing the pandemic did for me is it got me busy, and I finished the poem, which was about 5 British poets from World War I, all of whom were killed during the war. And in the course of doing this poem, I had to read a lot of biographies. And I also wrote a series of poems about the experience of reading biographies. I don't know if anyone's ever written poems about that before. And this is one of them. It's called Struck from the Chill of the World, upon reading J.M. Wilson's life of Isaac Rosenberg. Isaac Rosenberg was a poet and a painter. And he didn't go into the war until the very last year of the war. He was undersized, but they needed everybody they could get. And he actually volunteered because he had no other way of making a living, even though he was a brilliant writer and painter. So this is about the experience of reading a biography about him. And I'll just mention, too, that it also figures, another person that figures in the poem is my next-door neighbor, Silas, who's like 4 years old. And also my great-grandfather, William Waterworth, who was a British soldier in Salonika during the war. He was wounded in the shoulder during the war. But in family tradition, there's always a crazy aspect to anything that happens in our family. He was shot by his own tent mate. So that's what happened to him. Yeah. Were you here with me, Isaac, in this quiet room on Sand Spring this rainy August afternoon? How alien would we be one to another? Would you be wearing your thick wool tunic, or dismissed and jobless, peer at me from beneath your fedora's brim with sardonic eyes meant to conceal a shyness? It's a modern conceit, a century aged, in opposition to reticent stars, which cast their yellow eyelashes down upon the dark lucidity of a lost lake. Death, of course, makes a momentary catch in the breath, postponing the refreshment of dreams. Shot in the shoulder again. Should I go on or wait? But your Jewishness or Britishness would be no barrier, as each has folded me into itself with loving arms. And yet I wonder, how could it have been so long? Silas in the next yard sings, when the dog bites, when the bee stings, and like one of Crane's urchins gaily digs in dust and loam, though there is no nearby bottom of the sea to prove so cruel. I lay your life open on my lap to listen for a spell, hoping this boy, so beautiful, will find a kinder world than heartless fates allowed to you. Once, a boy as young, I may have known some vets from your war, Isaac, having watched a dozen march all out of step through Asbury in their still smart olive drabs, none worst for wear. Do I remember still a tear purling? Was it pity or pride as those men, so scarred with suffering, passed by and forever out of my living life? One hobbled a little, yet still strode boldly, his varnished cane fixing him in line as the roughed drums drove them all on in time. But these were Americans. My great-granddad, William, a painter and engraver too, a soldier in Salonika, was still alive then, though far away on Broadgate near the Ribble. We never came face to face or shared a word between us. No one thought to bear the long-distance cost, though now his painting shares this space, hanging in its drift of silence, decidua of a life lived. For you, costs abruptly busted in, and peacetime Britain could find no way to use you, so skilled and bright. So she offered you up, death's votary. I'm remembering now 2 jays, suburban poilus shrieking in a lilac bush, soon winging off to chase a crow that had been busy caching a speckled egg in the thickened summer grass, where it lay abandoned after, like the blind eye of the lawn. Never one to love your ignorance, you studied Herbert and Donne, folding them into your leaven so you might not become another's parakeet, might brave that first great decadent age, wielding a fought-for eloquence wrested from stammers. The breeze comes quiet this May morning, just cool enough for neighbors to sit out in secluded yards, scanning the news, sipping bitter coffee, resisting the day, while in the dead limb of a distant oak, the woodpecker exhales its melancholy coo. Thank you. I got one more, it's a short one. It's called Blackmail is a Mother with a Hammer. I thought of photos in memory's residue. The ribs showed through your shirt as you glanced at me. We ate freshly baked bread and drank black coffee. Drug fiends, at least for a little while. For a little while, there were no nebulous uncles of Jerusalem. That summer, around your mirror, I provided the lies. I know you have only the knife and fingerprints, but shimmering can be a tool. Thanks very much. Now I'd like to introduce Estelle Bajou, who came down from New York to join us today. She's a poet with a new book that's probably going to be coming out soon, I hope.
Hey everybody. If I'd known this was going to be filmed, I might have dressed a little differently. This is a poem I wrote during the pandemic also. I was in New York, I lived there, and I spent a lot of time on my own. I've been living on my own for the first time in my whole life, which felt like a miracle and then was kind of tough in its own way. So here's something that came out. It won't last. There are a couple epigrams here. I bleed by the black stream for my torn bow, James Joyce. Of a thing which could not be put back, not be made right again, In the deep glens where they lived, all things were older than man, and they hummed of mystery. Cormac McCarthy. He shall be cured when he shall forget his grievance and devote his divine gifts to the service of his own people. Edmund Wilson. There is a very loud amusement park right in front of my present lodgings. Vladimir Nabokov. I look down at myself. I'm bleeding but can't find the first wound, the wound that won't heal, the source of the blood. I look up, find there's no great battle happening out there. No one's pointing a weapon at me. I think of my Delhi guys who are from Yemen originally. It's Ramadan, and Adam, Ali's eldest, looked pale yesterday when I walked in to buy a pack of smokes. He was listening to a recording from the 50s, a man's crackling voice singing the Quran across decades. He wasn't smoking as he normally does. I said it was beautiful, because it was beautiful and woeful. I asked what the man was saying, and Adam pulled out his phone because it was too hard to translate, but I really wanted to know. Google Translate told us something indecipherable about a covenant. I thought about the word covenant then, asked how he was doing with the fasting. He said he was hungry, but that it felt good to be a little hungry, and smiled a kindly smile. I tried picturing myself as he was seeing me. Then we dapped and said our goodbyes because a really thin guy with 2 weeks of whiskers was waiting with a diminishing smile to buy something. Now I think of a podcast I heard about the war in Yemen. Adam's cousins, his aunts, uncles, grandparents, 500,000 people there may die of starvation, a state of hunger I can't really imagine. I think how 100,000 people have died already, children Adam's daughter's age, mothers of families, young men with whiskers, middle-aged, slightly lonely ladies, fathers with eyes that crinkle around the edges when they laugh, young women full of dreams. I wonder about Ramadan and whether fasting is a different kind of covenant this year, something Adam, Ali, and Samira, Mo, with his wonderful tendency to get a bit drunk and embarrass everyone by putting an arm around me so he can show me every photo in his phone when I come in late at night, and Musa, who can't be out of high school and is so shy. Abraham, a handsome cousin of the family, recently moved from Chicago, who said he wanted to take me to this island way off the coast of Yemen where there's these dragon blood trees that can live 1,000 years or more, this numinous, exotic place full of endemic species, so I could see how holy, how ravishing his homeland really is, something they can do for their people when there's nothing else to do. I think, how did I cut myself? This must be a clotting problem. I look down at myself. I'm sitting in a Stygian pool, spreading in a dark pool, lovely shape across my wooden floor, the shame of the shame, as familiar and specific to me as my own name. Snow lays thick where the shovels didn't get it, clean atop the trash and recycling over 100 years of footsteps. I'm up at 4 a.m. A few people are still partying from yesterday. A siren wails its way uptown. The Xmas lights glow a person into the room with me, an attentive person, seated in the chair I'm refinishing, watching me sip coffee from an old roommate's blue mug. He appears, and I've already poured him coffee into a mug from the set of dinnerware, white with green mosaic edges my mother bought when our family still had my father in it, before he revealed himself and our family blew up like an atom in an atom smasher. I wonder briefly if he knows about this. He takes a sip, whispers something indiscernible to the potted basil, which perks right up. Outside, they're freestyling as they head home in the gorgeous pink aurora. I think of the bread line, which must already be forming half a block away. To the apparition, I think, do you portend some kind of mental break? Am I finally losing it? To the tree across the street, I think, what am I to you? I touch your skin with my rough eyes, whisper count your rings. We may be the only souls awake on this threshold of spring, raising our arms to dawn. The person who's old enough to be my father but isn't smiles an effulgent smile that says, you're slightly ridiculous in your pajamas with your hair falling out of a top knot, but I can love you. You need no longer yearn for another companion. I'll be here. I wonder, will I be alone like this forever? I amuse myself with alternative history, points of divergence, the noise of a conjured reality. For example, I'm very close with my father. He's a great guy, super thoughtful, not an angry bone in his body, obliging bones, blitzkrieg of a laugh, gaze like the beam of a lighthouse. Since he retired, we hang out on weekends, idle in the park, build things out of wood, drive to state parks, hike up mountains, fish, pick wild blueberries for my mother. He loves my mother so much he loses his train of thought when he looks at her, her aspect still bewildering, precious after all these years. Their way of loving taught me everything I need to know about being with other people, with myself. When I was little and bad things happened, I could go to him. He'd lay a warm hand on my head, understand everything. I felt protected and seen. My dad thinks I'm doing great, even though I'm still poor. He thinks the way the arts are undervalued in our society is an outrage. Has never once told me to get a real job, helps me out when I can't pay the bills. He likes my husband, who's also a great guy, and didn't mind at all that we eloped. He found it very sensible we invested in a piece of land and is only too happy lending a hand when we go up to work on the cabin. Without him saying so, I know he'd be over the moon if we had a kid or adopted a kid, would just love being her grandpa, but at the very same time understands completely, doesn't mind a bit if we decide not to have kids. He gets that an artist's work is its own being, which requires nurturing, time, all the things a kid needs. Now I'm getting older, I think about what it'll be like switching roles, becoming the person upon whom he can rely, offering a steady arm as we take the stairs, placing an understanding hand on his warm head, which is losing some of its hair. I lose all my books in the fire, so listen to podcasts like it's my job. Then maybe to avoid the full weight of current events, I watch more TV than ever before. On my laptop, phone, in bed, on the couch, in the bath, while eating, cooking, knitting, dozing off. I find it comforting and also heartrending falling in love with a lovable, tragic hero who's not real. I laugh when he announces the death of a beloved colleague whose name he can't remember. I cry when the woman he loves hairs off to marry someone else. I carol when he solves the case. At no point does he judge me when I don't shower for 3 days, or bum me out, let me down, or leave me, even when I tell him things I never admit to boyfriends, even when things really don't look so good for him. A bell rings, and everybody goes outside. Lights are out as far as I can see. No one's cell phone is working. All engines and batteries have suddenly, finally died, their several arms folded like ended insects, peaceful and inert. Because it's so dark, we can more than see the milky white arc of stars spanning the night like a spectral rainbow. We can make out its singing, a bright, an endless note just within human hearing, just an ancient door buzzer ringing and ringing us in, just the night opening and opening at a hushed 8 hertz. We look around amazed. We're too moved to move. We're speechless. The sound of the world, of bugs, breath, hands holding, leaves being born, birds dreaming, fish swimming, elephants, armadillos, giraffes, water joining soil, is ineffable. We're too astonished to think of ourselves, or we begin to think of ourselves as one thing. And this thing is so daedal and exquisite that we're released from the dark integument of human shame. We can see beyond death, beyond the need for power, meaning, and even love, beyond all humanness. And in this sort of absence, we feel pretty great, even though we have no fucking clue what's happening, or why, or whether it will last. Thank you.
Council Lady Anita, thanks for coming, Anita. Anita Wood, Council Lady. What a great name for a politician. Anita Vote. I love it. Love you, thanks for coming. Is Paul Newell here? Our local lawyer poet. How about Frank Finale? Is he here? Frankie? What? Yeah. Frankie, come up here. I guess Paul Noel couldn't make it. Here you go.
Recently, a poet friend of mine died. No one would know his name, but he was on the staff of Without Halos. And I'd like to read one of his poems to begin with. He was 57. His daughter put together a chapbook of 20 of his poems. This one's called The Diner.
You know the kind, elongated metal igloos with cruddy windows and torn tiled floors, near factories and 2-pump gas stations, bypassed by no exit roads. Open at 6, close at 12, posted on cardboard with a spinning arrow. You know the kind. Menus soiled by 1,000 meals with paper-clipped specials. Meatloaf, always the meatloaf, and always the counter with one broken stool. Danish and donuts encased in cloudy plastic domes. And through the kitchen's swinging door, you could see the saturated fly paper. You know the kind. The coffee was always hot. This is a short poem about a photograph of my mother. My brother is still alive, takes care of me now. The photograph. I see you in a field of daisies. Your bright smile matches the white petals. A breeze lifts the strands of your dark hair. Distant woods shadow the edge of a field. But here, you're warm. But here, warm earth must rise to meet you. Soon you will be gone, and I, motherless, with a little brother to look after. Thank you. As I said, he more or less looks after me now. With all the UFOs and stuff, I brought a couple of poems that relate. First one's called The Outset. America, your history, short, fiery rockets set for the moon. 4th of Julys. In 50 years, buildings become monuments, historical points, already. Rocket gantries rust. Apollo looks for another job. In California, before California was, before Moses received the commandments and Christ was, Bristol cone pines were inching into the centuries, fire, ice, and wind shaping their twisted forms. Their knuckles dug into white mountains held their grip. Unnoticed as living driftwood in white mountains, in the womb of space, stars are bearing other histories, nations, pines. In the wheel of a galaxy we will never see, a ship leaves its planet. Here's another one of those related to UFOs. It's called Alien. We are star beings, pieces and bits of God and the sun itself. Shot into the seas and cooled, we emerged, our hearts still hot with the genesis of sun's forge and the God that hammered us into this blue planet, where air and water feed and calm our fire. We are star beings, half light, half dark, we turn. The hammer trips in our hearts, the tongues of flame still in our brain. Lights in the water reflect and shimmer our names. And one last one, thank you, bringing us down to earth in the Jersey Shore, called Jersey Shore Vacation again. Short. The same don't want to go home crowds walk the boards, breathe in hot dog, suntan lotion, saltwater taffy, creosote. At night, bands vibrate floors with 50s revival songs, hard rock, country. Bartender rings up change to the clink of empty bottles. In the corner, the silent TV. Morning surf roar, water and air. Breathe in crystals of mica glinting sea till salt speckles lungs and mind becomes clear as a gull's sweep over the jetty. It's the summer solstice. Step up, take a chance. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, the noise, I didn't think about that. We have 3 poets left, Charlie Bruns, Marshall Hart, and Robert Goodman. You guys all here? All right. That's a classy, I like that. Come up here. Marshall Hart.
Good morning, Long Branch. It's a pleasure to see us all out, not in anymore. So Emmanuel said, when I asked, is there a theme, he said, life affirmative, and we're all coming out of the other side of the pandemic. So I'm going to read 2 poems. The first poem really has 2 parts. I wrote a lot of poems during the pandemic. Actually, I wrote 200 poems about the pandemic. And I'm going to read this one. And it's a 2-parter. The first part was written in the middle of the pandemic in June of 2020. And after Emmanuel said he wanted affirmation, I wrote the second part in May of 2021. So this poem is called A Little Bit of That and This. Poetry in a Pandemic. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. What is it that we, the poets, offer? A view of the truth is what we proffer. As we see the body count mounting, we, the poets, in anguish, are shouting. There is rampant death now, sweeping across the land. Immunity to the virus is not yet at hand. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. We, the poets, know this to be the truth. Listen now to our protesting youth. The tide is turning, demanding a change. The racist social structure, rearrange. We, the poets, see the intersectionality of race, health, and wealth as the source of the calamity. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. We, the poets, are the people's unheard voice. We, the poets, describe the simple choice between suffocation or breath, between continued life or death. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. What do poets do? We, the poets, observe. We, the poets, describe. We, the poets, document. We, the poets, reflect. And above all, we, the poets, bear witness. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. We, the poets, have to bear witness. We, the poets, have to speak truth to power. We, the poets, have to do this before the final hour, before there will be no one left to witness. We, the poets, have to do this. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. A little bit of that and this. That was then. This is now. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. Now that we are maskless, but we are not taskless, we, the poets, bear witness. Witness to the affirmation of a rebirth of our nation, enabled by our vaccination, renewal of life, and affirmation. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. The pall is lifting, balance shifting. We have turned a corner on the virus that has spread sadness and death upon us. Now we can breathe the air, seemingly without a care, embracing all that we see in our land of the free. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. What do poets do? We, the poets, observe. We, the poets, describe. We, the poets, document. We, the poets, reflect. And above all, we, the poets, bear witness. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. We, the poets, have to bear witness. We, the poets, have to speak truth to power. We, the poets, have to do this before the final hour, before there will be no one left to witness. We, the poets, have to do this. We, the poets, write poetry in a pandemic. A little bit of that and this. That was then, this is now. That was that, now this is this. The last time we had a poetry festival was in 2019 on the boardwalk. And that August, I wrote an ode to Long Branch and looked forward to 2020 when I was going to read this poem back on the boardwalk again. But now it's 2021, and I have my opportunity to give my love of Long Branch to all of you. Ode to Long Branch. Summer offers a time for reflection as Long Branch moves closer to perfection. Our diverse Long Branch reaches out to everyone, offering acceptance to each daughter and son. Such is the blessing of our diverse and resplendent community. In our city of Long Branch, there's a sense of unity. As the waves roll in, we can all join in, sharing the joys of summer vacation, dancing on our sands of recreation, the ultimate peaceful destination, what we all seek without hesitation. As we come together, one and all, we are lured in by the ocean's call. The waves roll in, the waves roll out. The children jump in, swim and shout, with a sense of pleasure all about. Soothing waters caress our souls, easing tension, making us wholes. The benefit of living on the Atlantic's shoals. Beyond all the current political intensity, we all need and deserve a sense of serenity. As we bathe together, we show our propensity to celebrate Long Branch's beautiful diversity.
Charlie Bruns, a gentleman and a scholar, my buddy. And his beautiful wife. Lucky man.
Thank you, Emmanuel. The two original poems I'm going to read are also about the coronavirus pandemic. The first was written in March of 2020, and the second was completed just this past week. Each of the poems make a reference to popular 1970s songs, which some of you might remember. The first is called The Queen of Corona. If me and Julio can ever find it in the schoolyard, we're gonna beat the crap out of it and be on the cover of Newsweek. Then we're going to make a basketball out of it and let every good college and pro player pound it on the floor for a whole month. And then we're gonna turn it to a hard rubber disc and give every pro hockey player a chance to whack it with a wooden stick. Of course, we'll also shape it into a soccer ball and make sure every football pro in the world kicks it with all their might. Eventually, we'll reduce it to a ball with strings wrapped tightly in cowhide and give every Major League Baseball player a bat to hit it hundreds of feet. And then we'll chisel it down even further to a little ball with dimples and ask every golf tournament pro to tee off on it with an iron club. For good measure, we'll ask thoroughbred horse jockeys and mighty race car engine drivers to run over it again and just leave it behind in a trail of muddy dirt and dust. But we can't. We can only avoid it like a plague until it begins to wither and die. And then me and Julio will find it and kill it off once and for all. The second poem is called Seeing Clearly Now. I can see clearly now. The mask has gone away and stopped fogging up my glasses. I can walk down the boardwalk while breathing in the fresh air. I can sit down with family and friends close enough to clearly hear what they say. No, the coronavirus pandemic isn't quite over, but I can sense the end is near. People are having fun together again. I know because I can see the smile on their faces. We're resuming business as usual as more of us return to our workplaces. The concerts have returned to the park, and the shows are coming back to Broadway. They're playing baseball for fans in stadiums and new movies in cinema theaters. We're even able to see old cars along the beach and read new poems in person for others to hear. I can also see more clearly than ever the power of science applied by smart, hardworking, and dedicated people. I can also see more clearly now the value of healthcare professionals and the importance of those we refer to as essential workers, whether they have PhDs or high school degrees, regardless of whether they are paid thousands or hundreds each week. I can see more clearly now why we need to hug and why we need to be in the presence of others. I can see more clearly the present and the now and the gift of life we should cherish every day. The love we should not hold back from those dear to us, or the care for one another we should willingly provide. I can see clearly now the mask has gone away. The trees seem greener, the flowers prettier, birds are more noticeable, the sound of the ocean louder. People look more beautiful, simple pleasures more precious. Can the world be a better place for us who survived and make us more grateful than ever to be alive? Thank you.
And our final poet. And thank you for coming today. God bless you all. Our final poet is Robert Goodman. I hear you're going to read a Whitman poem today. You're going to read a Whitman poem today?
Maybe two witnesses.
That's a beautiful thing. I grew up on Walt and Emily.
I'm so glad so many of you are out here today. It's sometimes as a poet you kind of wonder who really likes poetry. You kind of do it as kind of a lone art, so to speak. But it's nice to see you out here all sharing, and I've really enjoyed so many of the readings, especially the original pieces. Is that better? Okay, I'll try to do a little better. America certainly has a number of poets that have celebrated the nation, but if we were to have a patron saint poet of America, it certainly would be Walt Whitman. I'm going to read two selections of his today, one in the beginning and one at the end, and then two short pieces in the middle that are inspired by things that happened here in Long Branch. The first Whitman piece was not actually in the original edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. If anybody has studied the history of the editions of Leaves of Grass, I think the last count was that there were 17 or so, and no two were alike because he kept adding to the collection. But this one actually appeared in the second edition. It's called Thou Mother with Equal Brood. On a day like today when we celebrate the nation, it's one piece that certainly speaks to who America is and what it is, and he does it so with such transcendent metaphors and personifications. Thou mother with equal brood, thou varied chain of different states, yet one identity only. A special song before I go I'd sing, o'er all the rest for thee, the future. I'd sow a seed for thee of endless nationality. I'd fashion thy ensemble, including body and soul. I'd show a way ahead thy real union and how it may be accomplished. The path to the house I seek to make, but leave to those to come the house itself. Belief I sing and preparation, as life and natural, great with reference to the present only, but greater still from what is yet to come. Out of that formula, for thee I sing. As a strong bird on pinions free, joyous, the amplest spaces heavenward cleaving, such be the thought I think of thee, America. Such be the recitative I bring for thee. The conceits of poets of other lands I bring thee not, nor the compliments that have served their turn so long, nor rhyme, nor classics, nor perfume of foreign court or indoor library. But an odor I'd bring is from forest of pine in Maine, or breath of an Illinois prairie, with open airs of Virginia, or Georgia, or Tennessee, or from Texas uplands, or Florida's glades, or the Saguenay's black stream, or the wide blue spread of Huron, with presentment of Yellowstone scenes or Yosemite, and murmuring under pervading all, I bring the rustling sea sound, that endless sounds from two great seas of the world. And for thy subtler refrains, dear mother, precludes of intellect tallying these and any thee, mine formulas fitted for thee, real and sang and large as thee and thee. Thou, mounting higher, diving deeper than we know, thou transcendental union, by thee fact to be justified. Sail, sail thy best, ship of democracy. Of value is thy freight. 'Tis not the present only. The past is also stored in thee. Thou holdest not the venture of thyself alone. Earth's resume entire floats on thy keel. Thy ship is steadied by thy spars. With thee time voyages in trust. the antecedent nations sink or swim with thee, with all their ancient struggles, martyrs, heroes, epics, wars. Thou bearest the other continents. Theirs as much as thine, the destination port triumphant, steer them. I've been writing poetry steadily for about 12 years, possibly good for about 2 years. And I have been asked at times, where do you get the inspiration for poems? And I think for those who write, you often find it in the everyday moments, those moments prosaic, and it suddenly sparks something in your mind and your heart, and it flows out into words on the page. This one was inspired by an incident on Broadway that happened on a December evening as I was leaving work. It's called Broadway. Framed in the dusk by shadow and holiday light, stood here now the dark-complexioned young boy man, postured for yearned confidence against the night, uncertain of the moment's hope without plan. Dismounted from bike, both now standing alone, sought to convey the air of how to be brave. As he spoke angrily into his mobile phone, desperate for satisfaction that would save. Quiet fear in his voice echoed in the still, moment of trusting no one and everyone. His bike, lone metaphor of an empty will, threw frustration skyward to oblivion, evermore into sky of diminished blues, as they faded to this winter's glaucous hues. The next one is entitled Perdita's Shoes. For those who are familiar with Shakespeare, Perdita was the lost daughter in The Winter's Tale. And it was inspired by doing my morning hike right along the ocean here and coming across a pair of lone shoes on the ground. At corner of Morris and Ocean this morn, I spied a pair of women's running shoes, and in their pairing both lone and forlorn, gave pause to now ponder what was the news. Their prosaic statement of unspoken loss hung in May's crisp morning air like a cross. Question wasn't if she had been running at all, worthy of contemplation what soon may come, but in the abandonment had made the call and decided to run to rather than now from. I'll close with Whitman's I Hear America Singing. I hear America singing the very carols I hear, those of mechanics, each one singing his, as it should be, blithe and strong. The carpenter singing his as he measures his plank or beam, the mason singing his as he makes ready for work or leaves off work. The boatman singing what belongs to him in his boat, the deckhand singing on the steamboat deck, the shoemaker singing as he sits on his bench, the hatter singing as he stands, the woodcutter song, the plowboys on his way in the morning, or at noon intermission, or at sundown, the delicious singing of the mother, or the young wife at work, or the girl sewing or washing, each singing what belongs to him or her and to no one else, the day what belongs today, at night, the party of young fellows, robust, friendly, singing with open mouths their strong, melodious songs. Thank you. It's been a pleasure and my honor.
Thank you, Manuel. Thank you. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you. That was great.
Okay, we're gonna, thank you very much, all of you, for reading and coming here. And goodbye. See you next year. Bye-bye.